There was never any expectation that it would unfold that way. He was my wife's son, strictly off limits, completely out of bounds. Yet that evening, with my wife passed out drunk downstairs, he quietly entered my bedroom, clicked the lock behind him, and fixed me with a look that said he knew I wouldn't intervene. And he was absolutely right. What followed shattered everything, and I still haven't felt the slightest regret for any moment of it. I never meant to notice him that way. Caleb had been a boy when I married his mother. He was all sharp knees and mood swings back then, distant, barely tolerating my presence. I never tried to play dad. I knew my place, but boys grow up. The one who came back from college that summer wasn't the one I remembered. He was 20 now, taller, leaner, tattooed. There was something in his stride I hadn't noticed before. Deliberate, easy, like he knew people watched him and didn't care. His voice had dropped, deeper, scratchier, each word carrying a double meaning. And God help me, I heard it that way. His mother, Marianne, was the reason he came back. She'd been drinking again, more heavily this time. The excuses got thinner, and the wine bottles piled up faster. I told myself I was staying for her, holding things together until she got help. But some part of me knew I was just coasting. Sleeping beside a woman who hadn't touched me in months, who slurred her words by 8 and forgot everything by morning. So when Caleb showed up that weekend, bags in hand, headphones slung, smirking, I felt gravity shift. "Hey," he said when I opened the door. I gave a half smile. "Didn't know you were coming this early." He shrugged, stepping inside. Mom stopped answering my texts. Figured that meant it was time. He smelled of cologne and road dust. When he passed me in the hallway, his shoulder brushed mine, and I felt it as I shouldn't. At dinner, his mother was already 3 glasses in. Caleb barely looked at her, picking at his food, eyes flicking toward the kitchen like he wanted out. I watched them in silence, aching with memories of how hard I tried before she slipped into this fog. Afterward, Marianne passed out in the recliner. Caleb and I cleaned up together, neither saying much. He rinsed dishes while I dried, then asked, "Is she always like this now?" I hesitated. "Worse lately." He nodded, jaw tight. "You don't have to lie for her." I didn't answer. When I handed him a plate, our fingers brushed, and for a second he didn't let go. His eyes flicked to mine, unreadable. "She doesn't see you," he said. I replied, "She's had a hard life." He named my marriage a misery. "That's what marriage is," I snapped, more out of habit than belief. He rinsed the last dish and turned off the faucet. As he walked past, his hand drifted to my lower back, brief, firm, deliberate. The heat lingered, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, Marian snored beside me, body wide awake. I could still feel where Caleb touched me. Around 2, I heard footsteps outside. Light and then nothing. He didn't knock, didn't try the door, but he was there. We hadn't done anything. Not yet, but we both knew we wanted to. The next morning, Caleb came down shirtless, towel low around his waist, water dripping from his hair. He walked into the kitchen like he owned it, like he hadn't been gone for 2 years. I was pouring coffee, trying to focus on the mug, but my pulse betrayed me. He stretched, towel slipping lower, and mumbled, "Mourn. There are such things as robes," I muttered, not hiding my frustration. He grinned without looking. "Are you complaining?" I ignored him, my gaze dipping briefly to his waist, the way water slid along his spine before disappearing beneath terry cloth. He poured coffee and leaned against the counter, studying me. "You always get this tense around me? Or am I just special?" "You're not special," I said. "You're inappropriate," he smirked. "That's not a no." I stepped past him, trying to pretend my heart wasn't pounding. "Put some clothes on before your mother comes down. She's out cold," he said. She was indeed 3 glasses deep by the time I got out of the shower, and I was too silent to argue. He disappeared into the hallway. When I looked out the window, I saw him in the backyard, shirtless in gym shorts, earbuds in, stretching. Felt like a show, and I hated that it worked. Later, Marian passed out on the sofa again, TV still flickering. I covered her with a blanket, habit more than affection, then found Caleb standing at the foot of the stairs, arms crossed. He stared at his mother, then at me. "Have you ever thought about leaving?" "I took vows," I said stiffly. He rolled his eyes. "She's not your wife anymore, Jonas." I looked at him. "You still love her?" He didn't look away. "What are you then?" he asked, stepping closer, hand trailing along the counter between us. "She doesn't see you," he said quietly. "She hasn't for years. Stop fooling yourself. You look at me like that." My chest tightened. "You think crossing that line changed anything?" he pressed. I didn't deny it. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. My hands trembled. I backed away, heading to the garage for space. I stayed there a while, organizing tools I hadn't touched in months, trying to calm myself, trying to forget how he looked at me. But he followed. I didn't hear him enter. He was suddenly leaning against the door frame, bare-chested, faintly dusted with sweat. "You used to build things out here before her drinking got worse," he said. I nodded, not turning. "You were happier then?" he pressed. "She's still your mother," he murmured. "And I still see what she's done to you," he added, stepping behind me. I felt his heat at my back, his breath ghost near my neck. He picked up a carving chisel, turning it in his hand. "Strong hands," he murmured. I stepped away. "Don't," I said. He shook his head softly. "Maybe you want me to," he replied. And I left the garage without another word. That night, I stood outside his darkened room, door cracked. I saw him lying on his bed, only in briefs, one hand beneath the waistband, the other behind his head, earbuds in, eyes open. When he saw me, he didn't flinch. He kept going, lips parted, chest rising and falling faster. I stood watching for a moment too long, then backed away. But the image followed me into dreams, and I woke sweating because next time, I knew I wouldn't walk away. For 2 days after that hallway moment, Caleb didn't push. He stayed quiet, focused on workouts, music, phone, like a fuse waiting to strike. The tension simmered in small moments. His knee brushing mine under the table, lingering. Marion barely noticed. She was a ghost behind locked doors. One evening, she passed out early. Caleb and I watched TV, barely following. I was in the armchair, he sprawled on the couch. "Funny," he said, voice low. "You keep pretending this house isn't falling apart. But you're the only one holding it together." "I'm doing what I can," I said. "That's not living. It's just surviving." He reached back, shirt lifting, exposing the cut of his obliques and a trail of hair leading below his sweats. I looked away too fast. He sat up. "Are you pretending?" "Pretending what?" I asked, even though we both knew. He leaned closer. "You don't want this. You haven't wanted this for weeks." I stood, heat crawling up my neck. "I'm going to bed," I said. But he was already there, standing close, smelling like soap and something electric. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I looked him dead in the eye. My mouth opened, but no words came. He tilted his head. "Maybe not, but you've imagined it." Couldn't deny it. Hands trembling, I walked away. The next day, I came home from the store and found him shirtless in the kitchen again, sweat clinging to his collarbone. "I went for a run," he said as I passed him. "You're going to get hurt," I said. He leaned against the island. "So are you." I turned, faced him. No smirk, just that burning look when I caught him watching me. "I want you," he said simply. Something inside me broke. I grabbed him, pushed him against the counter, and our mouths crashed together. He groaned into the kiss, his arms wrapping around me. My hands slid down his back, gripping the curve of his waist. We kissed like we didn't care who was upstairs. I pulled away first, panting, forehead against his. "This is a mistake," I said. "I don't care. We'll regret it. I'd regret not doing it more." He whispered, "Tonight. Let her drink. Let her sleep. I'll come to you." He kissed me again, deeper, and I felt he already owned my answer. That night, Marion passed out in bed with the bottle cradled in her hand. I hadn't bothered to clean it up. I lay waiting, heart silent. Past 11. The hallway light clicked on. Footsteps. Then the doorknob turned and clicked. He locked the door. I didn't move. He crossed the room, bare feet silent, wearing only low-slung sweatpants and that knowing look. He stopped beside the bed. "I told you I'd come," he whispered. "I thought you'd change your mind." I sat up slowly, sheet falling to my lap. He climbed in, straddling my thighs, palms braced beside my shoulders, chest close. I could see the curve of his throat. "I've wanted this since I came back," he said. "This is a mistake," I whispered. "Then don't stop me." His lips met mine again, hungry, searching. I kissed him back, hands tangling in his hair. He groaned, shifting into me. I felt how hard he was. "Jonas," he whispered, reverent. "Fuck Jonas." His voice nearly broke me. I kissed down his neck, then his chest, sliding my hand beneath his waistband. He helped his sweats down, and when he was bare, he didn't look away. I took him in my mouth, gentle, focused, until he shuddered, then collapsed against me. I crawled back up, kissed him slow and deep. He curled into my side, fingers brushing my waist. "You too," he whispered. I breathed. "I want to." He pushed my waistband down, and when I was bare, he watched me like he wanted to burn the image into his mind. He kissed me lower, and when I came again, slower, deeper. I gripped the sheets, moaning his name. He climbed on top, every movement deliberate, and when we finished, we collapsed, sweat slicked, breathless, completely bare. He curled into my chest, hand on my stomach, as if he never wanted to let go. "I don't know," I said when he asked. "What now?" "I want you," he repeated. His eyes didn't ask permission. He already had it. Morning came without regret. He was still beside me, arm draped across me, warm and breathing. It felt unsettling how natural it was. When light slipped through the blinds, I eased out of bed. He didn't wake. I watched him, bareback rising and falling, the imprint of my hand still there. I pulled on sweatpants and a hoodie and stepped into the hallway. Marion lived in the couch, passed out again, empty bottle like a warning, mouth hung open. I stared, trying to remember the last time she'd even looked at me with anything close to affection. When I returned upstairs, Caleb was sitting on the bed edge, shirtless, pulling his shirt over his head. "You left," he said, not accusing, observing. "I needed air," I replied. He nodded. "Me too." We didn't speak. Each of us knew what we'd done and would not name it. I watched him finish dressing, hands slower than usual, distracted. He paused at the door. "You think she knows?" I shook my head. "But you're thinking about what happens if she finds out." I didn't answer. I was thinking about everything. That night wasn't just a mistake. It meant something. Every glance, every silence between us was heavy with the truth we couldn't speak in daylight. Later, we sat at the kitchen table pretending to be normal. Marion shuffled around, groggy and hungover. "You two look like hell," she muttered. Under the table, I felt his foot brush mine. I jerked away too slow. Marion didn't notice. That afternoon, a void opened where Caleb used to be in the car. The leather seat felt cold without his presence. I tried to lose myself in the pages of a book in the living room, but the words blurred, indecipherable. My mind kept replaying the scene from the night before, a relentless loop of him beneath me, his voice a husky whisper of my name. The memory was both a torment and a secret pleasure. Around 5, I wandered towards the garage, seeking some distraction, but instead, I found him there, pacing restlessly. The fluorescent lights glinted off his bare skin, shirtless again, a habit I was quickly becoming accustomed to. "I can't stop thinking about last night," he confessed, his voice rough, laced with a mixture of guilt and longing. "I know," I replied softly, the sound barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator. He turned to face me fully, his expression a mixture of vulnerability and confusion. I've never done that before. Not with a guy, he admitted, the words hanging heavy in the air between us. I blinked, surprised despite myself. You haven't? I asked, seeking confirmation. He shook his head slowly, his gaze unwavering. I fantasized, yeah, spent hours lost in those thoughts. But I never acted on them. Never with anyone. His voice trailed off, his eyes searching mine for some kind of understanding, some kind of absolution. I felt drawn to him, an irresistible force pulling me closer. I took a deliberate step forward, closing the distance between us. Now it's real, I stated, the words a quiet acknowledgement of the new reality we had created. He nodded slowly, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. And I don't know what to do with it, he confessed, his voice laced with uncertainty. We stood in the dim half-light of the garage, the silence thick with unspoken emotions, a charged atmosphere crackling around us. You said it was a mistake, he said softly, breaking the silence, his voice barely a whisper. I sighed, the sound a release of pent-up tension. It wasn't already ruined, Caleb. We just stopped pretending. We stopped hiding from what we both wanted. He walked up to me, closing the remaining space until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Then why do you still look at me like that? He asked, his voice a low murmur, filled with both accusation and desire. I didn't answer, unable to articulate the complex emotions swirling within me. He reached out, his hand cupping my face, and then he kissed me, quick, desperate, a fleeting moment of intense connection. His hands then moved to grip the fabric of my hoodie, curling into the material as if seeking anchor. I kissed him back, momentarily lost in the sensation, but then pulled away, a wave of conflicting feelings washing over me. Don't, I breathed, the word a plea more than a command. You want me to pretend it didn't happen? He demanded, his voice tight with frustration, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and hurt. I want you to be okay, I replied, the words laced with genuine concern. He stepped back, his fists clenched at his sides, his body radiating tension. And what about you? What about how I feel? But he didn't wait for an answer. He turned abruptly and left, slamming the garage door behind him, leaving me standing alone in a life I suddenly felt I couldn't keep together anymore. I didn't see Caleb the rest of that night. I waited for some sign, some indication of his return. The sound of his car engine pulling into the driveway, the slam of the front door. But all I heard was the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears, a relentless rhythm of anxiety and longing. Later, I busied myself with mundane tasks, washing already clean dishes, opening and closing drawers aimlessly, seeking some semblance of normalcy in the chaos. At last, when the night had deepened, I went upstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway seemed longer, the air thicker, pressing down on me with an almost suffocating weight. His room was empty, the bed neatly made, devoid of any sign of his presence. He was gone, vanished into the night. I lay in bed between snoring Marianne, the sound grating on my nerves, unable to find any solace. I replayed the events of the past 2 days in my mind. His lips on mine, his ragged breath, the weight of his body under mine. I didn't sleep. I knew that if he knocked on my door, if he sought me out again, I'd let him in again, consequences be damned at by morning. His room was still empty, the silence amplifying his absence. When he finally walked in before noon, his appearance offered no explanation. He was wearing the same hoodie he'd had on the day before, the fabric rumpled and creased. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, dark circles beneath them betraying a sleepless night. I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, "Where were you?" "Jake's," he said flatly, offering no further explanation, his gaze averted. Marianne, groggy from sleep and alcohol, shuffled into the kitchen, her movements slow and unsteady. "You didn't text, Caleb. You could have at least said something." "I was worried sick. Didn't want to wake you," he muttered, his voice barely audible, avoiding eye contact. Nothing more, just a lie dropped like a stone. creating ripples of distrust and resentment. He avoided me meticulously. Each time our paths crossed, whether in the hallway or the kitchen, his gaze stayed fixed on the floor, refusing to meet mine. I wanted to shake him, to grab him by the shoulders and demand answers, to ask what we were doing to ourselves, to each other, but I couldn't. Not with Marianne in the house, not with everything still so heavy and unresolved between us. That evening, after Marianne got drunk again, her words slurring and her movements unsteady, I knocked hesitantly on his door. No answer. The silence from within was deafening. I opened it slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. He sat on the edge of the bed, his elbows resting on his knees, his head hanging low, staring fixedly at the floor. "You gonna pretend I'm not here?" I asked, my voice soft, laced with a mixture of anger and sadness. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence in any way. "Don't you ever feel like you're drowning in this house?" I continued, the question hanging in the air between us. My chest tightened, a familiar feeling of suffocation creeping in. "Every single day," he said, finally looking up, his eyes meeting mine. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from holding in too much, from bottling up his emotions until they threatened to explode. "I thought it'd feel better once I did it. Once I had you. I thought it'd make the tension go away, to give us some kind of relief. But it made it worse," he admitted, his voice filled with regret. I nodded slowly, my heart sinking with each word. "Yeah, me too," I admitted softly. My own admission cut deeper than I expected, a sharp pang of regret and disillusionment. "You think we ruined everything?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, laced with uncertainty. "I think it was already ruined," I said, echoing his earlier sentiment. "We just stopped pretending. We stopped denying ourselves the truth." We sat in silence, the sound of cicadas a constant drone outside the window, a peaceful, almost hypnotic sound, while a storm raged inside our hearts. Finally, he stood, paused at the door, his hand resting on the frame. "If I could go back," he began, his voice low and hesitant, "I don't think I'd stop it." My chest twisted with a mixture of pain and longing. "Me neither," I confessed, the words barely audible. He nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine one last time, then turned and left without another word, leaving me alone in the room with my thoughts. That night, I lay in bed alone, the silence amplifying my sense of isolation. The sheets still smelled faintly like him, a subtle reminder of his presence. The pillow beside me was dented from his head, a ghost of his touch lingering there. Silence pressed in from all sides, a heavy, suffocating blanket. I thought about how easy it would be to let him in if he knocked once, if he offered any sign of wanting to return. But he didn't. He didn't knock. I traced the empty space beside me with trembling fingers, wondering what happens when the only thing that makes you feel truly alive is the very thing that could ultimately ruin you. Because some first sins don't vanish easily. They stay etched into your skin, imprinted in the shape of his hands, the sound of his voice, and in that part of you that still desperately wants him to walk through the door again, to fill the emptiness with his presence. Weeks passed, blurring into a monotonous routine. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy, a fragile facade masking the turmoil beneath the surface. Marianne kept drinking, her addiction tightening its grip, often forgetting entire days in a haze of alcohol. Caleb went back to school early, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. He didn't hug me goodbye, didn't even meet my eyes, his gaze resolutely fixed on anything but me. He tossed his duffel into the car and drove off like the driveway was on fire, desperate to put as much distance between us as possible. And me? I pretended the house wasn't noticeably quieter, the silence amplifying his absence. I paused outside his room constantly, drawn by an invisible force, and at midnight, I stared at my phone, my fingers hovering over his name, tempted to reach out, to break the silence. 2 weeks later, while sorting through the laundry, I found one of his hoodies folded neatly in the laundry room. It was one of his favorites, the one he always wore when he was studying. I didn't wash it. I held it to my face, burying my nose in the fabric, breathing in whatever faint trace of him remained, clinging to the last vestiges of his scent. For a moment, I let myself ache, allowing the pain to wash over me. Not just for what we did, for the forbidden act itself, but for his closeness. The heat of his body, the way he really saw me, the feeling of being truly understood. I hadn't felt that from anyone lately. Not even from Marianne, who was increasingly lost in her own world of alcohol and oblivion. One night, late, I came home to find the porch light on, casting a warm glow on the deserted steps, and a note on the kitchen table, its message stark and unsettling. Marianne was gone again. Off with friends who drank like she did, disappearing into the night without a word. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the glass, and sat on the couch, letting the silence press in, a familiar but unwelcome companion. Then my phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. It was a message from Caleb. "I still see you in my dreams." No greeting, no context, just that simple, haunting statement. I stared at it for a long moment, the words burning themselves into my memory, then wrote, "Me too," my fingers trembling slightly as I typed. I didn't expect a reply, but I also didn't delete it, unwilling to completely sever the connection between us. Even though the house was quiet, the bed cold and empty, I knew what we shared wasn't gone entirely. It was just buried, lying dormant beneath the surface, waiting for something to ignite it once more. I didn't expect to hear from him again. I tried to convince myself it was over, that whatever happened between us was dead and buried, a fleeting moment of madness that should be forgotten. But when his message lit up my phone in the quiet of the night, a beacon in the darkness, I realized the truth. What we had wasn't over. Not really. Some stories don't end when the door closes. They begin with a message you weren't ready to receive but wanted more than anything. A message that cracks open the carefully constructed facade and exposes the raw, vulnerable heart beneath. So stay tuned, this is just the beginning.